Hi, and thank you for tuning into Comfort Connections. I'm your host, Tiffany Robinson, and today we're talking about something we see all the time in caregiving: what to do when a parent won't accept help, even when it's clear they need it. Joining me is Dr. Barry Jacobs, a clinical psychologist, family therapist, and national caregiving expert whose work has helped thousands of families through some of their toughest moments. Dr. Jacobs is the author of several books, including the newly released AARP Caregiver Answer book. He's also been a longtime voice of support for caregivers through his AARP.com column and continues to offer therapy focused on chronic illness and caregiving through his practice in Media, Pennsylvania. With decades of experience and deep compassion for caregivers, Dr. Jacobs brings both professional insight and personal heart to the conversation. I'm so glad to have him with us today. Welcome, Dr. Jacobs.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. It's really a privilege for me to be here.
Dr. Jacobs, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background and what led you to focus so deeply on the caregiver relationship.
Sure. So when I was 14, my father developed brain cancer, and that had an enormous impact on the whole family. He died when I was 15,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
and thank you. And um, what I learned at a very early age as a consequence of that is that illness is not something that just affects individuals; it affects whole families because we were all very deeply affected. And it became sort of my mission in life to help families do a better job of caring for loved ones than my own family did. During my family, unfortunately, during the time that my dad was ill and then afterwards, there was a lot of infighting between my mother and my father's mother, and the family had what's called a schism afterwards. People in the family didn't talk with one another for many, many years afterwards because of some of the hurt feelings and I mean, it was really awful. It made things worse for me. It was bad enough to lose my dad, but then when family members stopped talking to one another, it made everything worse. So I did a number of things in my life. Before I became a psychologist, I was a journalist, and because I love to write, but I eventually gravitated to becoming a psychologist. And as a psychologist, began working with family members, individuals dealing with chronic and serious illness, as well as their family members. And I've been doing this now for over 30 years.
Wow. Now, with working with so many families, do you feel like this moment of resistance where sometimes people are just not willing or they're not ready to accept care? Why do you think this is so common and something that we really do see regularly?
I mean, I think I'm going to state some of the obvious that we all know. I mean, number one is, even if we get older, it doesn't mean that we want to lose our independence. And the idea of accepting help for many people feels like they're losing their independence and therefore losing some of their identity. So that's really a big piece of it. They don't want their quote unquote kids taking over their lives. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is, and if I had a dollar for every time I've heard someone say this, I would have been a rich man a long time ago. That is people don't want to be a burden. The idea of burdening their children is just anathema to them. So they say things like, "You focus on yourself. You focus on your family. I'm fine. I don't want to burden you." And as a consequence, they really resist care that they need, and even if it puts them at some risk. And I went through this with my mom. My mom was a very proud, take charge kind of a lady, and then toward the end of her life, she developed all kinds of frailty, and she actually had vascular dementia eventually. But what the idea of my caring for her made her feel like she was losing herself, and she was very aware that what I did for her, I wasn't doing for my teenage children at the time, and she just didn't want to allow me to do that, and fought, made the caregiving harder because she fought me, she resisted me
Right.
so hard.
Something that I read in your book, and I think it goes along with these same lines, is going from being the helper to being helped. And I think that that's probably something that's really difficult to kind of wrap your mind around. How do you help people navigate that?
It's not easy, and because I mean, there is a kind of grief that goes along with that, especially for people who've been helpers their whole lives, and now are on the receiving end of care, and feel like the receiving end of care is somehow demeaning or humiliating. So I say things to them like, I ask them, when you were middle aged and your parents needed help, did you care for them? And almost invariably they say, yes, I care for my parents as they age. And I said, and how did they receive that care? And sometimes they tell stories of their own parents resisting care. And I said, well, what was that like for you? But in essence, I try to help them think about what their children, their adult children, are going through now. And the fact is, their adult children, they genuinely want to help them, and a parent's resistance is making that adult child's life harder. Whereas providing that opportunity for that adult child to actually help is an opportunity for that child to grow and mature. And isn't that what parents want to do for adult children?
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on how they can come to the table and have this difficult conversation? I know myself, I'm working with families, and many of them are looking into care, but they haven't spoken to their loved ones at all because they are so unsure of what that response will be. What will they think about, even family caregivers coming in or professional caregivers?
I mean, as you're pointing out, people don't rush into this conversation because
Right.
it's an uncomfortable conversation because, and oftentimes when you bring it up with a parent, you don't say, "Hey, you're getting older. I want to run your life now." You don't start there, but you basically say, um, you're going to your annual physical appointment with your doctor. Can you're now 70 years old. Let's start talking about what you want to do as you get older. You're in great shape now, but perhaps 10 years from now, you may need more help. And rather than wait till then uh, to give you the help, let me help you now think through what it is you want, or what are your plans for where you might want to live, what are your plans for how you want to live. And the adult child saying to a parent, I'm not I'm here to support you to live the way you want, not the way I think you should. And if parents from very early on see the adult child as an ally rather than as a kind of adversary in this, they're more apt to have these conversations. I also always tell adult children, this is not one conversation. This is a conversation where almost the first uh, two or three times is a sure thing. The parent is going to say, no, I don't want to talk about this, or what are you worrying about? I got this, right? And but if the child and not to bring it up every day, but looking for opportunities. Maybe another family member has had fallen and broken a hip, or maybe another family member has decided to move, or maybe someone has hired home health aides, and those are all opportunities to have a conversation about what uh, what your parent may need, and just gently raising the topic and saying, hey, I think this is a good thing for us to talk about. And again, it's not about my telling you what to do. It's really more about my listening to what you want.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you really talked about planning. So we're not always coming or waiting until this person really absolutely cannot live alone. They can't do many things for themselves. We want to start the conversation much earlier than that. Because if we're able to think ahead, but even if you are inviting family caregivers or agency caregivers in, we're starting small. We may not be coming in and spending 8 hours a day with someone. That can be overwhelming when you've lived alone. Maybe you have someone that's just popping in, whether it's your children or an agency that you've hired, to do some light housekeeping, to do some grocery shopping for you, to take you to the grocery store if maybe driving is an issue. So, not coming in and just, like you said, we're taking over, we're doing everything, you're not going to do anything for yourself anymore. We want to make sure that we're really giving them the idea of this care is not to take away independence. When I'm working with, potential clients, I'm talking to them about this is how we keep mom independent. We want her if she wants to stay in the home she's been in for 50 or 60 years, we want to help her do that. And by doing that, it means maybe we're having someone come in and do some standby assistance while she's showering. Not completely taking over the process, but being a partner with her to keep her in her home.
I agree with you completely, Tiffany. That idea of developing that partnership, that trusting partnership, matters enormously. And I also agree with this idea that most of the time this doesn't happen all at once. It happens very gradually. Maybe somebody has always hired someone to help clean their home. And so there's already a precedent for bringing people into the home to provide some help, maybe for a task that you don't particularly want to do, or maybe you have someone come and cut your lawn because you don't want to do that. And so bringing somebody in to maybe help with something specific, like uh, helping with showering or helping with other care tasks, maybe it doesn't seem so onerous. It doesn't seem so out of the question. So you kind of ease your way in and you develop that trusting relationship, and I think that's the start of people becoming more accepting of help that, as you point out, enables them to be more independent, not simply lose their sense of independence.
Absolutely. One thing that I also got from your book is really the importance of not only the right time, but the right place of where we're having this conversation. You used an example of, I think it was Thanksgiving dinner, right? Does mom really want the family coming at her while we're passing the mashed potatoes down the row here? We want to make sure that we're encouraging people to really think about what will this conversation look like? Where will it be? When will it take place?
I agree, and those big family gatherings are not the right place, and doing it one on one initially. Uh, and even if you have siblings who feel exactly the same as you do, if you bring all the siblings in and mom, we're having a big family meeting here. We're gonna talk about this. I mean, what's gonna happen is mom's anxiety is gonna go up, her hackles are gonna be up, and the conversation is not gonna go very far. But I think with one child basically saying, "Hey, mom, it's your 75th birthday. But what do you want for your birthday? And not just what do you want for your birthday present, but what do what are your thoughts about the way you're living?" And and have that gentle conversation and doing it in a nice, calm way, and hopefully, in person. But to basically start at the beginning of a dialogue that's going to go on for a while.
One other thing that I feel like I see on a regular basis when I'm talking to families is that I really think the wrong approach is to come to mom or dad, whoever this loved one is, and say, you're going to get either help from us family, help from an agency, or you're going to a nursing home. Really kind of coming in very strong. And I think it really makes that client feel, very much not respected, listened to. What are kind of your thoughts on, how do we bring this up where the parents are going to feel we're on your team? We care about you. We want the same things. And that's why we're looking into care.
I mean, just along the lines of everything we've been saying to this point, that we're communicating respect and we're honoring their dignity. We're not treating them like a sack of potatoes that we're going to deposit somewhere, or we're just not doing something to their house that we've decided to put a ramp to your front door, or we're putting in a stair glide, whether you like it or not. I mean,
Right.
that I can't think of anything more alienating than that. I mean, what parent wants their children to boss them around? I mean, what parents absolutely hate is this idea that this is a quote unquote role reversal. And now the children are the parents and the parents are children. I mean, it's so repugnant to them that they have been reduced to the state of children and don't have decision making power in their own lives. They're gonna fight that like the Dickens. And so we have to approach them with a real sense of gentleness and respect and honoring who they are and what they want.
Absolutely. When we're working with families, something that I always try to communicate to the families is that, if they decide to utilize an agency such as ours, there are many families who are really banding together, working together. Everyone's maybe taking a day with mom or grandma. But if they've gotten to the point where maybe they're interested in services, I tell them that our services are as much for them as it is for the client. We want the client to have better days. We want to improve their quality of life. But we also want those same things for these family caregivers, getting a little bit of respite and however they maybe find that, whether it's using an agency like ComForCare and At Your Side, or if they have maybe a friend from church, let's say, that's willing to give them a break for a couple hours on a Saturday. I think it's so important that we're thinking about these family caregivers and their emotional well being.
Yes, and we're talking about older adults resisting care. I mean, sometimes family caregivers resist care because they feel like they're supposed to do this, and if they hire somebody, that it somehow means they're failing in their job as being a good son or a good daughter. And I think, as you point out, when we bring help into the home, when we hire somebody, it enables caregivers to go to the bank and, or I guess people don't go to the bank anymore, right? It's all online. Excuse me, but they maybe get their hair done, or
Absolutely.
they visit friends, but or they take care of other family responsibilities because
Right.
none of us are, just have very few of us just have one family relationship. We have multiple family relationships, and we have responsibilities to various people. I mean, many caregivers are still working. And so unless they're planning on giving up their job, then they have to have somebody there caring for their loved one at a certain time of day. And I mean, the idea of hiring help enables them to better balance being a caregiver with the rest of their lives. Without those home and community-based services that help in the home, is just not possible.
I had actually written down from your book in my notes exactly what you just said, that few of us only have one role. We're playing so many roles. If it's employee, caregiver, daughter, all of these roles. And that can be really overwhelming when we think about everything that this family caregiver is dealing with. What is some tips to kind of help them? When I'm caring for mom, maybe I'm just focusing on mom and then I let my brain go to what's next, maybe when I leave. What are your tips on just really kind of holding it together? Because that's a lot to manage.
It is a lot, and, I mean, I can tell you personally, I was caring for my mom. I was married, I said I'm married. I have responsibilities as a husband. Our children, or son and daughter, were teenagers then, so I had responsibilities as a dad. I had a full-time job, and the the first step is to just take into account that this is a lot. It is a lot, and that we have to really, give ourselves grace and be kind to ourselves and not hold ourselves to some standard that we can't meet. What I ended up feeling was that I wasn't a good caregiver to my mom, that I wasn't a good husband, I wasn't a good father, I wasn't a good worker because I was spread so thin. I couldn't do anything the way I really thought I should. The idea of what I think I should I needed to change my standards a little bit to take into account that I was now taking on so many other responsibilities. So that's a big piece of it. We have to not be so self-critical. Yeah. Secondly, I think we have to really develop plans that are realistic. And so if we're intending to, no, so there's going to be, we only have so many hours in the day. We have to cut back somewhere. So where are we cutting back? Where a lot of people cut back first is in their own self-care, which they do at their own peril, because if they're not doing their exercise, if they're not going to the doctor, then they may be placing their own health at risk. But they have to really think about what's possible to do. So maybe I can only spend 2 hours with my mom in an evening because I still have to get home and spend some time with my wife, or maybe I have to prepare a report for work the next day, or maybe I have to check my children's homework. If my mother needs more than those 2 hours of help in the evening, or 1 hour, or 30 minutes, whatever I can afford, then I have to make arrangements for her needs to be met in another way. And again, that may mean hiring somebody to be with her in the evening. So the responsibility isn't solely on my shoulders.
What advice could you offer families? Because this is another common scenario that I see. There may be four siblings, and one or two of them are local to mom. And so they really feel this weight on them because they're local. They're here. They're the ones that can go to the doctor with mom, or they're the ones that are popping in every day. What's some advice? Because I have to imagine that puts them in a spot where I know my brother lives 2 states away, but I feel like he's not pulling his full share of helping with mom.
Tiffany, if there's one thing that caregivers have very strong emotions about, it's what goes on with their siblings during caregiving. Because I mean,
Absolutely.
this is like the most common thing I talk about when as a psychologist. Um, so here I'll paint the ideal. The ideal is that even though people are maybe in different places geographically, or even different places emotionally, that everybody pitches in some form or fashion, and it's not going to be equal. There's always going to be one or perhaps two siblings that are going to do most of the work, but that if someone lives 2 states away, then Perhaps they come and they spend a week during their vacation and give the siblings who are on the front line some respite. Or perhaps they take care of the insurance, all the paperwork from 2 states away, which they can do. Or perhaps they send money. There are things that they can do. The expectation is everybody pitches in, and that the caregiving siblings talk together about what's possible for each of them, what they're available, able, and willing to do, and when that happens, things work out better. And again, it's not going to be equal, but everybody feels like they're in this together. The bad scenario is when one sibling says, "Well, I never got along with mom anyway. I don't want to take care of her." And the other siblings say, "Well, you may be not just abandoning mom, you're abandoning us, and that's going to affect our relationships with you." And or the sibling says, "Yeah, yeah, I'll be there. I'll help you. I'll help you. But I'm running my own business. I'm really busy. I'll get there. I'll get to you when I'll help out when I can." That also causes tremendous bad feeling among the siblings who are doing
Absolutely.
most of the work. So it takes a lot of conversation. Sometimes it takes mediation. I often work with sibling groups where there's been conflict to help them better understand what a parent's diagnosis is, what the parent's needs are, and how they can help not just the parent, but really help each other.
I really like the idea of you working with a sibling group of how is everyone feeling? How is everyone chipping in? I think that's fantastic. I hope more families take advantage of working with someone like you because I think it can really benefit them because we do sometimes see that relationships can become difficult and not be the same after we've gone through the process of caring for a loved one.
I mean, I've seen siblings who are so angry at one another. I mean, I have one now basically said, when mom dies, I'm not talking with my sibling again. That's it. It's over. And what a tragedy, because you're not just losing a parent, then you're losing a brother or sister.
Exactly.
And I mean, we want to avoid that as much as possible. I mentioned from the beginning in my own family, there was a schism, and father side of the family didn't talk with my mother forever after. I don't want families to go through that. It's very, very painful.
How do you support maybe that main family caregiver who they want to keep showing up, they want to be compassionate, they want to, respect mom, but they're overwhelmed. And so maybe they're feeling like they're losing their patience, right? I'm not talking to mom the way I would normally talk to mom. I'm overwhelmed. I have a lot going on. How do we help them navigate that?
Really good question, because I think this is another very common issue that comes up. People, either while caregiving or after caregiving is over, feel very guilty about having talked harshly to mom or having yelled at mom. And so what I often say is, you're human, and if you've ever had an argument with mom in the past, and it doesn't it means that you're probably going to have arguments with her now, but even if she's now on the receiving end of your care, your relationship continues. If you butted heads before, you're going to butt heads now. That's just what it is. And but so I try to help people understand that, number one, that sometimes talking in an irritated sounding voice is normal. It's just normal family friction. Secondly, that if they're finding that they're irritated a lot, or they're talking in ways that they feel guilty a lot, it means that the caregiving plan that they have in place is not working, that they're too stressed and they need to change the plan. And that may be a sign that they're burning out. Maybe it's often a result of not getting enough sleep, because they're not sleeping well, because they're worrying too much. And so it may be a time for them to really think about, okay, what other help do I need to bring in? What other family help do I need to bring in? Or what other professional help do I need to hire to reduce the burden of care that I'm feeling? Because I can't sustain this. I've carried this burden for a while. It's now wearing me down. I need to relieve the burden to some degree. I'm not going to stop caregiving, but I need to make it more manageable.
Right. Another scenario that we run into is it's not necessarily the caregiver that's coming in with maybe the bad attitude, it's the client themselves. And we have to think about this as a person who's maybe realizing we're at end of life, they're not feeling well. I'm not comfortable, I'm not doing the things I used to be able to do. And how do we approach that where you're showing up and you have a loved one where you're saying, "I'm coming every day and trying to help you," and you're not appreciating it or you're yelling at me or, how do we navigate that?
For the person who's in that position, I want to see, in fact, that they're clinically depressed because oftentimes is when people are feeling poorly and when they are feeling, they're in despair. um, they may in fact have depression, and sometimes treating their depression medically or even with counseling will improve their behavior to other people. For the caregiver, what I often say is, human nature, unfortunately, is it's the person to whom we're closest that we tend to vent the most to or take out our frustrations on.
That's true.
And so the caregivers are sometimes the kind of major target of clients' unhappiness. And the other thing I say is there's an old saying that misery loves company. And there's been all kinds of psychological research to suggest that, in fact, people who are miserable make other people miserable. And, it's like common sense, but we need
Yes.
research to confirm that. But, um, and that it's actually kind of a way that people who are feeling miserable can feel less alone with their misery if they make you feel miserable too. Now, if they're not doing you any favors by making you feel miserable, but it's just kind of what happens. And so I really work hard with caregivers to not take this personally. And I say exactly that. This is not personal. This is about how your mom, your dad is feeling, and they're not feeling well physically, they're not feeling well emotionally, and they're just not at their best right now. And you're going to do the best that you can with them. And they're no matter what you do, you're not going to make them happy because they're at a place in their lives where they're not going to be happy.
Right. And I think for us, I see it being mostly the family caregivers that really take this, to heart of how mom or dad are treating them or speaking to them. Our professional caregivers, they've seen this, a few times. They realize that this is sometimes part of the process of what's going on. So I always think it's important for the family to, look into support groups, maybe speaking with a counselor, someone that can help them with this because this is a very, very hard spot to be in your life. But you're not alone,
No, they're not alone. There are millions of people in the same boat. And I
right?
think your suggestion is an excellent one. I think going to a support group uh, and having the opportunity to talk with other people who may not have exactly the same caregiving situation, but are in the same position of working their tail off and not feeling appreciated. And because that's a very, as you point out, it's a very unfair place to be, and it's a very hurtful place to be, and people react. But when you go to a support group and you talk with other people who've had similar experiences, you feel validated and you feel supported. And then there's often people who've been caregiving longer than you have who can say to you, "This is this is this is what caregiving is. This is not about you, and this is about the fact that you have someone who is at the end of their lives that are struggling, and this is part of their struggle."
What would be one small step this week that someone could take, even if their parent says no? What's one small step that they could take this week in opening the conversation, starting the process, and helping their loved ones feel that they are on their team in navigating this journey?
So I would say, "Hey, mom, your older sister is thinking about moving to a smaller home or to an apartment, and because she thinks it'd just be easier to live that way. Have you given that any thought yourself? I mean, this house that you're in is 3 stories, and it's filled with stuff. Mom, you've been collecting my old elementary school notebooks, and you've got my high school trophies, and you've got all the family heirlooms are here, but this is not fair for you to have to live in a place that may become more difficult for you. And so, have you given this any thought? That would be a place to start." And mom would say, "Yeah, I've given it some thought, but I'm not interested." And I say, "Well, when you talk with your sister about the fact that she's decided to move, how did that conversation go? What did she tell you? What was the basis for her decision?" So you kind of begin to grease the wheels here for having mom think about this a little bit more.
What is one message you want adult children to hold on to when they're facing this kind of resistance?
I would say again, not to take it personally, and to see this as a process. Unfortunately, there are folks that there are clients who will always resent the help that they're being given, and that's really unfortunate. My mom, unfortunately, was resented the help I gave her until the day she died. But what I have seen in other families is that uh, the resistance eventually melts away and people become more pragmatic, and then actually hopefully reach a place of being grateful that they have good children that are doing their best to help them, and they're really fortunate in that regard. And what the children say to them, is, "Mom, you took good care of me, and now I want to help you live as well as you can, and the way you want." And that that's a really nice place where adult children and parents can get, where they're expressing mutual, uh, gratitude and admiration for one another, and really defining what family is.
Yeah. I really want to thank you so much for your time, your expertise that you've been sharing with us. I want to encourage every single listener who is going through this, or even if you work with families going through this process. I think your AARP column, as well as your brand new AARP Caregiver Answer Book, I think those are going to be such valuable tools to these individuals. So I encourage them. Do you want to tell people where they can get your book?
Yeah, so the AARP Caregiver Answer Book is available through all outlets, Amazon, etc.
Awesome.
It's available on the AARP website. It's also available on the website of the publisher, Guilford Press. So it's going to be widely available. And if folks have any interest in contacting me or reading more about me and learning more about the book, they can come to our website, which is www.caregiveranswerbook.com. And I say we because this is a book that I co-authored with my wife, who's also a psychologist, named Julie Mayer. And
Fantastic.
this is the third book we've co-authored now, and it's been a great thing in our marriage to do this. It's really brought us closer together. But she is every bit as learned, if not more so, than I am about how families handle this. She has her own family caregiving story, so thank you for your interest in the book, and thank you for your encouragement, encouraging folks to take a look at it. I mean, our hope is 150 questions and answers on all sorts of different caregiving related topics, and we're really hopeful that it'll answer a lot of the questions, particularly new caregivers have about what is this? What am I supposed to do? How do I do this
Exactly.
right? And give them a little greater assurance that they can do this.
Awesome. Thank you again for your time and your expertise.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.